China's zero COVID policy is possibly hurting the country in more ways than one. Its COVID-19 model initially curbed the infection successfully, but ever since the Omicron variant started to spread, China has not been able to curb the infections effectively. The Chinese Communist regime is relying on regular mass PCR testing by testing every citizen several times a week. But despite the desperate attempts of China's health officials to isolate recent outbreaks through barricading buildings and even cordoning off single individuals in public spaces, around 200 million people of the country continue to remain confined to their homes in lockdowns. In every village, town and city, testing requirements have become more burdensome and the punishment for failing to comply more severe. With the growing testing apparatus, the resources supporting it have come under more financial strain, and the government, which funds most of the testing, has shown signs that it is struggling to pay up. The strategy is pressurizing the smaller local governments, which are already under pressure to stimulate a slowing economy. The financial burden has forced them to divert funds from poverty alleviation and infrastructure to finance mass testing. China has been reluctant to change its policy for dealing with the virus. Its zero-COVID strategy has not only hurt its domestic economy, but also the global supply chain, as one of the major economies of the world continues to remain shut in a staggered manner, even after 2 years of the pandemic. While Taiwan and Hong Kong have already opened up. China failed to produce an effective vaccine, and its pharmaceutical industry failed to develop a life-saving antiviral. The government continues to refuse to buy non-Chinese vaccines and therapeutics. There is no compulsion to be vaccinated. There is barely a public awareness campaign. Strict lockdowns, mass testing, constant scanning of health codes and travel restrictions have stopped China's hospitals from being swarmed, but it's also come at a cost. Official youth unemployment standing at over 18%. Earlier this year, it was a nudging 20%. With us on the broadcast this minute is Einar Tangen, who is a political and economic commentator from Beijing. Tell us more about the impact that the zero-COVID strategy really has had on when it comes to the larger backlash that the Chinese authorities have been facing. We have seen the criticism that's come the way of Beijing already, but tell us more about why China insists on using the zero-COVID policy. China is sticking to its zero-COVID policies, like I said, despite the strict lockdowns and the criticism and the many ways in which its youth also have been bearing the brunt. We will just try and reconnect that line with our guest, Einar Tangen, who has been getting us his perspectives on this story. Now, even after 2 years of the pandemic, Taiwan and Hong Kong have already opened up. China has also been adhering to its zero-COVID policy, but at the same time, a lot of question marks over whether it's been working or not. Einar, as I was asking you, what's your perspective on the zero-COVID policy that China is insisting on continuing with, despite the ways in which it has not worked out and the way the last few months have really shaped up for Beijing?
Well, I think it's a matter of perspective. Your narrative is very much along the lines that, you said China didn't produce an effective vaccine. I think Brazil, Indonesia, and most of Africa would disagree with you because they were the ones who actually got the Chinese vaccine, which has kept them there. China's largest concern right now is something called long COVID. This is something that's affecting long term over, a year, up to 3% of the people who get it. And they're very concerned that they have to get the people vaccinated before they can open up. So at this time, they've been very successful at preventing deaths. They've run the best economy in the world. I don't know where you get the sense that they're on the verge of default or falling down. It's an old narrative. Quite frankly, they have the largest trade surpluses they've had in a long, long time. The economy does face headwinds. COVID is a drag on that, but I think it's been sensationalized.
How is China planning to tackle the youth unemployment, which has, of course, become a concern?
Well, yeah, luckily it's less than your youth unemployment in India, but it is a major concern here in China, and especially for college graduates. About 54% of them report having jobs. That means the rest do not. What they're doing is they're trying to open spots in local government areas, trying to create job opportunities. But interestingly, a lot of the students are not taking the jobs offered because they don't see it as suitable for them because they have these college degrees. So at this time, they're kind of waiting and hoping that the economy will get better. At some point it will, but I do agree that China will have to at some point come to terms with how it's going to deal with COVID-19. They want to get a better handle on exactly what the damage from long COVID would be. I mean, there's 17 million people in Europe that are affected. It's raised health costs in the United States on a yearly basis by $220 billion. It has resulted in
If I can just interrupt you there, and Einar,
sure.
I mean, there's no denying that there are protests on the ground. There is backlash against zero COVID. I'm looking at this report where it says that banners were displayed on a bridge in the district of Haidian calling for an end to the policy, food, not COVID tests. How do you react to that?
Well, I mean, people are fed up. I mean, it's been a long, long period of time. I live here in Beijing. I understand their frustration, but frustration and science are two different things. Unfortunately, COVID doesn't feel frustration. It's a disease. It's a virus, and it spreads. So while people have an emotional response, the scientific one is that you have to be very cautious. Otherwise, you could be moving
food, Einar,
in China's case.
Sure, but shortage of food is not an emotional response.
There's no shortage.
It's a basic.
There's no shortage.
You denying that there's any shortage of food in China?
There's no shortage of food in China.
Okay.
That's completely ridiculous. I live here, and I believe you. I can walk into
any
store
part of China. You're saying
shelves are. I have no idea about other parts of China.
Okay.
I haven't been there, but there's been no reports that. And for your station to report that seems a little odd, given that there are no facts on that basis.
Well, let's just agree to disagree on that point. We're leaving it there for the moment,
It's
Einar.
factual. It's not agreement. It's either facts. You have the facts, or you don't.
We have the facts and we have the reports with us.
Where?
But like I said, let's just agree to disagree for now.
Okay, let's have the reports then.
We will. Thanks very much. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.